I think we'll get started, everyone. It's 7:01 and we have our live stream up and running. So I'd like to welcome everyone here to this ordinary council meeting this evening. My name's Karen Redman. I am the Mayor of the town of Gawler. I'd like to welcome all our elected members, our staff, our CEO Henry Innett, our minute taker Kate, and our media representatives Jack and Sam from the Barossa, Clare and Gawler News, and of course the Bunyip as well. And people who are watching on the live stream, welcome. I hope you enjoy this evening, and also people sitting in our community gallery face to face, welcome. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on tonight is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country, we also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. So, roll call. We have everyone here that isn't on leave of absence. We have no apologies. Are there any motions to grant leave of absence? Councillor Hughes.
I've got a leave of absence for Councillor Little from the 1st of October to the 21st of October inclusive.
To the 21st of October inclusive?
Yep.
Seconded by Councillor Fraser. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Are there any other motions to grant leave of absence? There be none. Thank you. So we do have Councillor Nathan Shanks on leave of absence currently, and we have no non-attendees. So we're now moving down to item 3, which is public open forum. And I have one person who wishes to speak, and that is Mr. Graham Brookman. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? No, don't see any hands going up. So Graham, if you'd like to come to the lectern and just make sure that mic's turned on, Graham. Thank you and welcome.
Does that sound okay?
That's beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Brookman.
Thank you. As you all probably know, Barossa is requesting non-GM state designation from the Minister. Playford consultation suggests that non-GM is a prudent course to take them. So an arc of communities potentially building around Adelaide from Port Gawler to Kangaroo Island, Adelaide Hills, Mount Barker, Onkaparinga, Alexandrina and Yankalilla have said in their consultations that they wish to remain free of GM crops. District Council of Lights wanting to have part of its area designated non-GM and part GM in its negotiations with the Minister currently ongoing. The result of Gawler's consultation said the community prefers Gawler to be a non-GM area, and that's also the advice of the review by the council staff. Many councils have now shared research on the issue, so Gawler's in a position of being able to relatively quickly prepare a case to the Minister should the council decide to apply for non-GM designation. About markets and trade. Non-GM food crops are more profitable than the alternative GM varieties in Australia, as shown by the relatively low acreage of GM food in food crops in Australia. It's only about 15% or so. And there's also the demonstration of the profitability in the PIRSA gross margins publication, which includes all of the information from the variety trials that have been going on around South Australia for some time. There are significant premiums paid for non-GM, and it's driven mainly by the European market for sustainably grown Australian canola, a sustainability bonus of $10 a tonne, and in the preference premium of $50 to $100 a tonne. These facts contradict the politically driven findings of the Anderson and Mercado reports commissioned by various GM lobby groups. However, the facts are corroborated by the world's biggest grain trader, and in Australia that's AWB Cargill. As far as segregation of GM materials concerned, the Executive Director of Biosecurity said last year that even whilst a GM-free state, South Australia has had ongoing contamination issues year on year. PIRSA has required an isolation distance of 1.5 kilometres to ensure no cross-pollination occurred at a licensed GM canola multiplier at Mount Gambier. So GM canola can pollinate oilseeds, mustard and brassica vegetable crops. So it is a real live issue, this business of cross-pollination and creation of super weeds, that sort of thing. Any GM material in a product can trigger a loss of non-GM or organic status. So material from GM interrow crops or pastures, GM yeast or fruit can cause market problems. Regions that have been able to limit the ingress of GM through intensive biosecurity and clean-up arrangements have done okay. And in South Australia, PIRSA has been quick to help farmers eliminate regular GM breaches that have occurred. So we've maintained our non-GM status, but each clean-up operation is costly and requires follow-up checking. So there's basically no food labelled GM in supermarkets pretty much around the world because of community concerns about health and environment. So where does all of that GM food go? Much become stock feed and some becomes fuel. Whilst broadacre farmers may be prepared to spray more and make less profit per hectare to produce an industrial product, the agricultural areas around Adelaide and the Fleurieu are growing fresh food for human consumption. More than 20 years of government and university support for GM in Australia has failed to deliver commercial GM food crop varieties in South Australia exhibiting the promised characteristics of drought tolerance, disease resistance, etc., etc. Instead, all but one of the GM food crops registered for commercial production in Australia are for crop varieties that enable herbicide to be sprayed over them without significant damage to the crop. Many farmers essentially use GM varieties so they can intensively spray paddocks that have become weedy and still get a yield, albeit a low gross margin. Meanwhile, Australian non-GM plant breeding has been making reasonably steady progress, producing high quality, low rainfall adapted new cultivars, but their funding is not necessarily as secure as it should be. Now, although Gawler has some 300 primary production properties, it's a relatively built up area, so the likelihood of spray drift from GM farming is of special interest. Where are we? Okay. Non-GM farmers tend to use tillage, haymaking, livestock and other methods to control weeds rather than virtually 100% herbicides.
So 30 seconds, thank you, Graham.
So I think the bottom line is, as a service centre, Gawler stands to gain not only from primary production in our council area, but from the continuing prosperity of surrounding areas. I certainly encourage Gawler Council to cooperate with the surrounding councils and become part of a viable, high-value, non-GM food bowl around Adelaide. And I'm very happy to explain ways in which the trade and marketing benefit to Gawler could possibly be calculated. And I believe it's potentially in the hundreds of thousands of dollars as time goes by. So it's no small amount of money where we do have cropping land that will grow either GM or non-GM crops, and it's the non-GM ones that have really got a future. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Are there any questions for Mr. Brookman? Thank you. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.
That concludes public open forum. We have no deputations, declarations of interest. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest? Councillor Goldstone and Councillor Hughes.
Item 11.12 and item 18.1.
And I'll get you to declare that when the time comes. Thank you. And Councillor Hughes?
Item 11.2.
11.2. Councillor Hughes. And I declare a conflict in 11.6 and 11.7. Thank you. Any other members wish to declare any conflicts? No? Okay. There are no adjourned items, there are no petitions. Moving on to confirmation of minutes. We have two sets of minutes. I'll go through the first set, ordinary council meeting on the 25th of August. Hello. All good? All good. Okay. Thank you. You wish to move that way? That that we accept the ordinary council meeting minutes of the 25th of August. Councillor Davies, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goldstone. Any discussion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? It is carried. Thank you. Moving on to special council meeting on the 31st of August. You happy to move that way? You happy to second, Councillor Fraser? So moved by Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Fraser. Any discussion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? It is carried. Thank you. Business arising from minutes. I'll move on to item 10, council member reports. And I believe you've presented these. Councillor Hughes, do you wish to speak to that? Are you happy to move that we note the minutes of the Gawler District Health Advisory Council meeting? Yep. Do you wish to second? Any discussion? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Are there any other council member reports? Councillor Davies.
Yes, so I went along soon after the last council meeting to the Trinity College musical of Footloose, which was very exciting. It was about a council that decided to ban dancing, which is very relevant, I think, in our current time. So I found that quite interesting. We also had a nice chat with the Gawler Town Band, which I guess I'll mention here because we had a corporate community services meeting that didn't meet quorum, but the Gawler Town Band did come along to speak. So we did end up having a bit of an informal chat with them and about ideas of, places where they can perform and that sort of thing, because they're having a lot of trouble booking events, as all the events that they usually book have been cancelled for the year. So yeah, so good luck to them on that.
Councillor Little.
Yeah, I represented the Mayor at the Williston Football Club for the Sponsors Day, along with Nick Champion and Tony Piccolo. Some interesting information coming out about grants. They've started a club where they're going to try and raise $100,000, which the federal government and the state government say they'll match, go towards amenities, mainly for women's sports. So it was quite a fruitful discussion. I had a discussion on behalf of the Mayor also. The only oval at the moment, that's what I brought it up last week, that complies with AFL standards in our district is the Williston Oval. The others don't. So that's another thing that was discussed. They also discussed about the new oval going out of Roseworthy. They know that's going to be AFL standards, so they're a bit concerned. So Williston are on the front foot, which is good, and they're trying to raise that $100,000 in the next 12 to 18 months. So they told me to pass that on to council, which I've done.
Fantastic. Any other elected member reports? So I went along to Xavier College tour and unveiling of plans for Two Wells campus. It's not in our council area, but it is in our region, and Catholic education is very strong in the region, and many Gawler kids go to Xavier College. So it was really interesting to see this brand new school that they're building at Two Wells as well. We had a citizenship ceremony. That was the first citizenship ceremony we've had face-to-face since COVID, and that was really exciting. It's always a bit different when everyone's spread apart. You can only allowed so many people, but everyone, it's always a very moving ceremony when people decide to take up citizenship. I went along to the launch of Martin Johnson's new book, Albatross. It's a collection of poems that he's written. He's very talented, Martin Johnson. That was at the PA Hotel. And we had music there as well, as you would expect. But yeah, Martin's a bit of an icon in Gawler. Went along to Triple B FM and did a radio interview on the 14th of September and just talked about lots of different things to do with Gawler. You walk in and you get asked questions, you don't know what you're going to get asked. So it's always a bit of fun. And it's good to promote what we're doing here in the town. And most recently, we've had a meeting with the Apex Club, who are keen to work with council on different events, given that the carols have been cancelled. So that was a really positive and fruitful discussion around opportunities to partner with us here at council. So that's my verbal update. So I'm happy to accept a motion that we accept the verbal updates as well. Are you happy to move that way, Councillor Little? Seconded, Councillor Koch. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. So we move on now to page 6 of our agenda, and it is the Hindmarsh Boulevard Landscape Amenity Improvement Project. And it's my pleasure to welcome Jess Miller, who is zooming in from Greencat, one of our consultants that have been helping us with this site. Welcome, Jess.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. I can hear you, just.
Good. Good evening.
Good evening.
Move a bit closer to my laptop.
So, Jess, you're here to answer any questions, is that right?
That's correct. Anything
Okay.
you would like to?
Thank you very much for zooming in. So I'll take the report as read. Councillor Goldstone, you happy to move the officers? Do you wish to speak?
Just briefly, you know, it's unfortunate that this is turning out to be a bit of an expensive project, but we can't do nothing. We can't ignore the asbestos, and we can't leave things as they are. So I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Happy to second, Councillor Fraser. Do you wish to speak at all?
Yes, all but item 6 is just noting, so it's all in the report. And as Councillor Goldson said, it's an unfortunate thing, but we have to fix it. So, and it is expensive, but it is asbestos that we're dealing with. So,
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Goldstone, you happy for me to put that motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Jess. Thanks for answering all those questions. That was great.
No worries. You have a good evening.
Good evening to you. Thank you. So we're moving on to page 13 of our agenda, which is, just turn my page over. Waterproofing Gawler, 2030 update. You have Councillor Hughes.
My conflict is a perceived conflict. I'm employed by Northern York Landscape Board. I'm not employed by the Department of Environment and Water, but I still come under the Environment Minister as a separate statutory body. I'm going to deal with the matter by staying in the room and voting on the matter.
Thank you. And you filled out your form. Thank you. Okay. So now, do we have? It says in our agenda that Catherine Miles and Hannah Elliard from Dew are joining us. Have they joined us? No, I don't think so. Are they planning to join us? No? You send them a text? Okay. Okay. Well, we'll keep going. We have an officer's recommendation here. Happy to accept a mover that way. Councillor Little, you happy to move that way? Do you wish to speak at all? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fraser, do you wish to speak at all? Any discussion, Councillor Koch?
Look, yeah, I've got a question. I've got some queries around this. Just from reading this, it looks like that we're using Bolivar water. Is that right? My concern is that Bolivar water is probably sodic, and we could end up with sodic soils. And what that means is that you're basically putting sodium onto the soil, which then collapses the soil structure, which then makes it unusable, basically. So I just want to know if this feasibility study would also look at the quality of the water, Because if we're only using Bolivar water, and especially in summer when the salinity goes up because of great evaporation rate in the ponds, although you're not using the DAF, you're actually only using the DAF, which is the salinity is lower, you still have a problem, I think, with salinity. And in particular, when we look at the IPOS report done by Mr. Jerry Charlton, he actually looked at reducing green space. So my view is that to save resources, you just don't use them. So instead of having planting large green open spaces, you have smaller open green spaces. And as Mr. Charlton said, you use shrubs and native grasses, etc. So I'm just concerned about the quality of the water and that we're importing water that may cause our soils to go acidic.
Well, it's very good timing because Hannah Elliard has just joined us from Dew. But Sam Delena, you're happy to answer questions, or do you want to refer to Hannah? I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I think as appropriate, I'm happy to refer him on if I need some additional assistance. Thank you, Hannah, for joining us. So in regards to that particular question, the business case, the proposal is a connection to the Virginia Pipeline Scheme, effectively, which is taking water from Bolivar per se. Through the next phase, obviously, would qualify the water quality per se, and how that relates to, particularly our use for turf irrigation, noting that the current water that's being used for the irrigation of vineyards in Seppardsfield. But notwithstanding the fact, obviously that'll be an area of investigation as part of that business case development.
So I might just formally welcome you, Hannah, to the meeting. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and clear. Thank you. There was just a question around, I think Councillor Koch, around Bolivar water and the salinity and sodic soils and the risk of that.
Yeah, and there's certainly, I've heard issues with some of the Bolivar water quality before, but I think it should be all right. But as I guess Sam said in relation to that earlier question, all of these things would be things that we'd make sure we covered in the business case, so that part of ensuring that...
Hannah, we're finding it really difficult to understand you. Maybe if you talk a bit slower.
Yeah, sorry.
We're just not picking up the words for some reason.
Okay, sorry, is that a bit better?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just hold it a bit closer to me, which means you've probably got a close-up of my face. But so making sure that the water is a suitable quality for the end use across all of the projects, we definitely explore in the business case. But the VPS water has been used for lots of different purposes and lots of different types of irrigation. To be honest, I'm not sure how it relates to turf, but certainly the water needs to be suitable for your purposes for the project. So if it's not good enough quality water for what you want, then overall the project wouldn't be feasible.
Okay. Thank
you.
Definitely.
We wouldn't be trying to force water on you that wasn't what you wanted.
Okay. So I didn't really pick that up. I don't know if other people picked that up, but you're saying that there will be investigations around the quality of the water. Is it for the purpose that it's being used for? Is that what you said?
Well, as part of the business case, we'll look more closely at the engineering options, which will include the source of water supply, which at this stage we've looked at it being VPS supplied, potentially through the Bunyip network, but we do need to do a little bit more work, particularly in relation to the town of Gawler proposal, compared with some of the other parts of the project on the engineering solutions, and that can include making sure we double check that water quality is appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. I'll hand back to Sam.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, obviously a little bit of trouble hearing in that regard. Effectively, the next stage of the project will undertake a number of investigations. We've got a few hurdles we need to get across just from an infrastructure provision as well, but we'll look at water quality. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we have any discussion? So we have Councillor Little. Are you happy for me to close the debate? I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah.
No problem. I shall leave you now and let you get on with the rest of your meeting. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Okay, so 11.3, and I'm on page 23, genetically modified crops submission. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the, let's see. So it's the second version, it's that we do support an application.
Adopts the position.
Yeah, adopts the
One and,
position.
you
that-
happy to move 1 and 2? The point 1 and 2 under that second option?
Yeah.
Yep. Do you wish to speak to it?
So, yeah, I've got, so I had a motion coming up on the motions on notice about this in any case. So, but I think this is something that this is our third time discussing it now, so I won't go over everything. But I think the one thing that has changed that was up in the air before is the question of what other councils are doing about it. There was sort of a discussion around, well, what if we go GM free and then, you know, neighbouring councils like Barossa don't, and it's just sort of a waste of our time. Well, I think it's the other way around now. Now we know that the Barossa is very concerned about being GM free, and Light is also trying to keep some restrictions. And so, you know, I think it's a moral thing for us now to say, well, look, let's not be the one in the local community who's sort of, you know, coughing on people and not washing their hands, you know, like these other councils that, you know, specialise in this, in farming and that sort of thing, want to be GM free, and we need to, you know, respect their wishes and help to maintain a buffer, I think.
So we have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Fraser, do you wish to speak?
I agree with what Councillor Davies just said then. That was very good. Mr Brookman has told us too that you need a 1.5 area, 1.5 kilometre area around anything that's GM to be free, so somebody else can. That restricts Gawler in a long way because we're so small, and it just makes sense. We've got to look after things. If they use this GM stuff for stock feed, the animals eat it, then it's just passed through to us. It's passed through, you know, through the fertiliser, it's passed through their meats. It's just crazy. We just need to stay GM and organic.
Thank you. So I have a mover and a seconder. I'll open it up to discussion. Councillor Samble.
Is there a cost to submit, you know, the application? If we voted in favour of this and we're going to then lodge an application, is there a cost in that to this council?
Is Jane Strange, you're the author? I might refer to you, Jane, if you'd like to come up to the podium and answer that question. Thank you, Jane.
Good evening. Through the Mayor, no, there is no cost. Staff will do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goldstein.
The only reason I didn't support this at the last meeting was the $20,000 cost that was being put on the review. So now that that's been addressed, I'm happy to support the recommendation.
Any other discussion? No. Councillor Davies, you happy for me to put the motion? Thank you. Thank you, Jane. You may take your seat. Are you happy for me to put that motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion on the board here, please raise your hand. All those against? It is carried. Thank you. You want to call a division? Councillor Davies has called a division. I'll ask all those in favour to please stand and I'll call your names out. All those in favour are Councillor Davies, Councillor Koch, Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Samble and Councillor Fraser. All those against are Councillor Vallelonga, Councillor Tooley and Councillor Little. The motion is carried. Thank you. You may take your seats. So moving on to 11.4, on page 30, we have an updated economic development strategy. Thank you, Kirsty Dudley, who's written this report. Got a motion, officer's recommendation. You happy to move that way, Councillor Hughes? Do you wish to speak?
Just briefly, I think it's really important that this document goes out and includes the extra information on COVID. We really need these documents to actually be user-friendly and used. So I think it needs to be as relevant as possible. So happy to support it.
You happy to second, Councillor Samble? Do you wish to speak at all? No. Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? There be none. Councillor Hughes, you happy for me to put that motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. It is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to Black Spot application, page 35. And we've got some attachments and some drawings around potential design for roundabouts and what have you. How many times has this intersection been changed over the years? I was thinking about it when I was looking at the attachments, and I thought this is probably the third or fourth reiteration, isn't it, Councillor Little? Okay, right. We do have an officer's recommendation here. Are you happy to move that way, Councillor Hughes? Do you wish to speak at all? Anything to improve safety is really important. I also think Dalkeith Road and Anglevale Road is quite dangerous, that intersection there. It's a drag. I've seen so many near misses there. It's a drag.
Yeah, which would be, I think, really important to look at that. But yeah, happy to move the motion.
You happy to second, Councillor Goldstone?
Yes, happy to second it. I think the preferred option would be the roundabout. When you look at the actual attachments and the drawings, I can't, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it properly. So I don't know if we get a chance to push that as a preferred option.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Samble.
I'm just a bit bewildered about the fact of the money. It says in order of 100,000 to 200,000. And I've always been bewildered about when Dipti get involved with these things. I mean, to me, I would classify that as a main road, even though it's in our council area. My grandson had a prank there a couple of weeks ago, so I know that too. But what I'm saying is, with all of this should this council have to put up this money? I mean, there's no set figure, 100 to 200, it could be 300. When does Dipti come in on this, or does this council have to apply for grants to support that very dangerous intersection?
Mr. Delina, I think that's always a good question. So thank you. If you could provide happy to provide a response.
Yes, certainly. It's a bit early days with respect to the actual final outcome, but as it relates to preparing this agenda, it's all happening in the background with Playford officers and council officers. But effectively, it's a council, this is a council road or a local government road, 50% Zanagorla, 50% Playford. I suppose where the state government comes into play here is through this Black Spot funding program that will assist local governments with respect to funding safety upgrades at those intersections. There is an opportunity here to get 100% funding, as what we did with Lindock Road and High Street, which is the direction that is, out here, yeah, out this way. with respect to that because of the nature of and the benefit that applied from a benefit cost ratio perspective. So the aim is to actually seek to get this 100% funded, and that's what every black spot application aims to do. But if it doesn't meet that, depending on the number of projects and the rank, how this project would rank in those, it may fall into the state government program, of which we would then be up for about 16.5% of the costs, which is why there's this range of 100 to 200, being the 200 being the upper limit of what we'd suggest that this project, 16.5% share of this project would be. So hopefully that's answered your question, but it's our responsibility in a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Any other discussion? Councillor Hughes, you happy for me to close the debate? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So moving on to item 11.6 on page 41, I will be declaring a conflict as a candidate in the LGA President election, and I'll also declare a conflict in 11.7 because they follow each other, and I'll be leaving the room for both items. Thank you. And I think Councillor Davies is happy. Thank you for taking the chair.
All right, so 11.6, LGA President election. Do we have a mover, Councillor Sample? Do we have a seconder, Councillor Fraser? Do you wish to speak?
Yes, I certainly move this motion. I believe that our Mayor has shown very much leadership towards and being part of the LGA as she has been for the last couple of years. It's not an easy feat. And when I was the President of Mayor, I was involved with it, and it's certainly a lot of work to be involved with that. And I think that's been verified, and also that she acknowledges the point that she would like to endorse. So I'd proudly endorse that she wishes to go on and be the candidate for the LGA President for the following 2 years.
And Councillor Fraser, did you want to speak? No. I'll open up for discussion. Any discussion? Otherwise, we'll vote. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Tully? Go ahead.
I'll speak just before Councillor. Yeah, I'll speak against this motion to be consistent with my views. I've read the letters from the other candidate. I believe there are 2 other candidates. We have a letter from one of them, Angela Evans, and we've received the letter that Mayor Redmond's put out. And I think there's a big contrast between those letters. I get a sense when I read Angela Evans that 2 things stand out when I read that. She makes a point of what she calls trouble-free leadership. And I've been on this council now for 6 years, and I believe that that's one of the weaknesses of our Mayor. I think she's very strong on process, very strong on rules and regulations, doesn't, in my view, always apply them consistently or evenly. But in my view, doesn't generate a real sense of open collaboration. And I think Councillor Fraser called it the toxic chamber. I think it's got worse. I'm not the leader. I'm not the leader of the chamber. I think the leadership, when you have ongoing conflicts, should do something to try and resolve that. In my experience, the Mayor has never tried to resolve the differences which exist. There was differences in the previous chamber, there's differences in this chamber. And I think if you're going to be the President of the LGA, you need to have the qualities to take people with you, to bring people together, to mediate, to bring in those people who have a different view, not crush them, not use the rules and regulations to suppress them. That will just cause some, like me, to arc up. and to fight against that when you feel there's injustice. As a leader, I always work to bring my people together, to resolve very large groups, 125 staff, and in many ways no different to a council, differing views. But you have to have the skills to bring those people together. And I don't believe that our mayor has those skills. I think this council would function a lot better if from the leadership down there was an attempt to resolve the differences, and I would be party to that. But I've never, ever, ever been brought in with the opportunity to try to resolve those, discuss those matters. So that's one thing. I think the skill of leadership and collaboration is missing. I think also the vision. If someone said to me, what is the mayor's vision for Gawler? I'd struggle to explain that. Beyond the civic centre in the first term and boundary reform in the second term, I don't believe there's a clear articulation of the vision. And certainly in the mayor's letter, her marketing strategy, I don't get anything other than a few motherhood statements. I don't get any clear vision. But in the few words that Angela Evans has put in, she's hit on some of the key things. And I was looking for climate change and it was there in that one. This is the biggest issue that we will face. And the LGA needs leadership. I have been lobbying the LGA. You know about my said motions. I've been lobbying Telfer. They know that. Pinnaker, I lobby them about you must act on climate change. There is nothing more important as we go future than addressing that. The future of our generations hangs on it. And it's not there. And I don't hear it from our mayor either. And I don't see it or haven't heard from her. And she could have taken it at a critical time as we come out from the economic impacts of COVID. These pandemics will keep coming. The crisis of climate change, a deputy mayor, we don't have the trust invested in someone for that position. There's a third point, if you like. And so, yeah, I think there's a lack of vision and a lack of the qualities required to be the LGA president. Time is up, Mr. Annette.
Yeah. So, are there any other speakers? Otherwise, we will have a vote. All in favour? All against? It is carried. Division has been called. So all those who are in favour, please stand up. What's that? I don't think the chair votes. The mayor doesn't vote, and I'm acting mayor. Yeah, that's right. So all in favour are Councillor Koch, Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Little, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Samble and Councillor Fraser. All against are Councillor Vallelonga and Councillor Tooley. The motion is carried. So we'll move on to the next one, which is 11.7, election of GayRock representatives. So this one, so we need to move the motion, but we also need to fill in the blanks here. So does Councillor Goldstone?
Just have a question. Can we just nominate Mayor Karen Redmond without nominating a second person?
Refer to the governance officer. Okay, do you know?
It's not a situation I've been faced with before. I can go back and confirm with the rules to nominate. I can't see why there would be an issue with us just nominating one, but we obviously do have the option to put forward two names as there are two places available.
The only reason I ask that is because I've done a fair bit of research on both of the other applicants, and I don't feel particularly comfortable in supporting either of them. So I'm quite happy to move the recommendation with only one being our mayor, if the group agrees.
So, well, in that case, do you want to speak to it, or was that you speaking to it? No, was you speaking to it? Do we have a seconder? We'll just bring it up on the screen. So we're just removing that number 2. Just the following candidate. And Councillor Samble is seconding that. Do you wish to speak? No. So any other discussion? Councillor Tooley?
Again, to be consistent with my views, I just don't support the structure. Sarrock and Garrock, it sounds lovely on a flowchart, but your executive, their pays, their positions, their entitlements. Then you come down to the Sarrock and the Garrock. I would defy any of you to be able to give me a list of what you think Garrock have done for you in the last 2 years. I get publications from the LGA president that come out on emails that give me an update about what the LGA is doing. And yet these 2 superstructures with their fees, with their entitlements to travel budgets, with their entitlements to accommodation budgets, it's just more of the bog standard bureaucratic system that just chews up more and more money. And for what purpose? The only thing I can remember from Garrock is they ran during the COVID a bit of a Zoom link up. I don't know if any of you watched it, but there was nothing in there that I saw on the agenda that I was going to learn that was new, so I didn't bother. But we've got these 2 super committees, Sarrock and Garrock. We don't even get regular publications from them. We don't even get tabled from our mayor, who's the chair. We don't even get the agendas. We don't even get the minutes circulated. Oh, they're on the web if you want them. We've got the rep here. We don't ever get invited. What would you like the Garrock to be deciding on your behalf? It's this elitist approach that says, we will do the decisions, we've got the agenda. Lack of consultation. Twice Garrock has blocked our own said motion. Twice. And it's probably only a politically astute move that the mayor tells us the 3rd attempt that I put up got through the executive to go to the AGM. It was blocked at all other times. And yet we're the very council, and on the 2nd of the 3rd, we were unanimous and it got blocked. Go figure that. And we never get consulted. So if you guys are happy with, and I think many of you are, I think you seem to be very conservative in your views and quite like linear thinking, and it's a lovely flowchart, it all looks lovely, and hey, why wouldn't we? Well, you'll vote for it, but I would rather disrupt that and say no, get stuffed. Stick with one group. They do all the decision making anyway. The executive vets everything that Garrock and Sarrock ever do, gets vetted by them. They're the rubber stamp at the end. And then they even don't allow everything to go to the AGM and the OGM. Go figure that. You've got, what, 67, 72 members. You could have a motion unanimous from a council, and Garrock could block it, Sarrock could block it, and then the other lot block it, and it never gets on the floor of the AGM or OGM to be dealt with. How is that democracy? And this is the system they've wrapped up. And the other thing they've wrapped up in the system is the only person who can run for the LGA president has to be on the Garrock and has to have served the 2 terms on the Garrock. So the other people, the other mayors that might be very worthy, they can't get there. They've got it stitched up with a beautiful little, tight little constitution. And it's not serving our interests. And we pay big money every year to help facilitate all of that faff. So no, being consistent with my views, I do not support the Garrock, and therefore I cannot support a nomination.
Councillor Sample.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason we've just taken away number 2, as I've just reread it again, I put a note by it there before, is that there is to nominate one of the other three persons. So I don't think we're going to do justice to the point of what we've been asked for here with the letter to our CEO. And it says that there is three persons, the City of Salisbury and the City of Tea Tree Gully. I think it'd be unfair if we did not use what Kelvin has taken away. He may have understood that it was one of us that had to nominate for that, but it's not one of us. It's another mayor to be on the Garrett thing. I'm not sure. Maybe Kate could elaborate on that. The way I read it here again on page 272 is that they need two nominees, and there's three that are there, and it's up to us to nominate two persons, and we'll be nominating our mayor. And if that's the case, I'll certainly not to nominate Mayor Gillian Aldridge, the City of Salisbury, as being number two.
So I think the way it works is that if this passes, then we're going with this. If this doesn't get up, we can move an alternate motion, and then you would add that name. Or, I mean, actually, we can ask the mover and seconder whether they'd be happy with that as an amendment.
Yeah, I fully understood what I was doing when I moved this. Like I said, there's two other people to consider, and I just don't feel comfortable in nominating either of them. That's why I purposely took them out. But if you want to move an amendment or an alternative motion, you can, but I'd rather just stick with as it is there.
All right, so as it stands now, unless someone moves an amendment, etc., we're going to be voting on this version of it, of just sending the mayor up. So is there any other discussion before we go to a vote? CEO?
So if I could just be clear, if Councillor Samble is moving an amendment, because that's the words that are used. So if that's the words that are used, I think that's what we should be processing.
Okay, so yeah, it is an amendment. Do we have a seconder for the amendment, Councillor Vallelonga? Did you wish to speak further, or was that you speaking to it just then?
We'll revert it back to the original motion. It's on our books. Because basically, and I would nominate then to a very passionate mayor of Salisbury, Gillian Aldridge, to be number two alongside of our Mayor of Gawler.
Okay, so, and did you want to speak? Okay, so currently we're in an amendment that we add Mayor Gillian Aldridge to the list. Is there any further discussion? I think if you've already spoken to the motion, you can't speak to the amendment, if I remember. So is there anyone who hasn't spoken who wishes to speak about the amendment? Otherwise, we will move on this amendment and then go back to the motion. So all those in favour of the amendment? All those against? It is lost. So we're back to the original motion that we just select Mayor Redman as the representative. Is there any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? It is carried. Councillor Vallelonga has called a division. So all those who are in favour, please stand up. And all those in favour are Councillor Koch, Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Little, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Samble and Councillor Fraser. And all those against are Councillor Vallelonga and Councillor Tooley. It is passed. And we can bring the Mayor back in.
We haven't done the right thing.
Okay, so I'm on page 45. Town of Gawler Community Plan update to 2030. Happy to move that way, Councillor Hughes.
Just briefly, this is probably the most important document council produces in its time as council. There's some really important policy procedures, goals, strategies, whatever you like to call them, but it's all in this document. It does have our boundary reform agenda. It does have a lot of different directions for our community that the council wants to go into the future and address. It's a very important document, and it's very important that it goes out for this final round of consultation. So, yeah, very happy to endorse it to go out.
Councillor Sample, you wish to second?
Yes.
Do you wish to speak at all?
Yes, so certainly, and I endorse what Councillor Hughes has said. It's a very, very important document that we have to work with as a Bible into the future. I'm not saying I'm very happy with some of the pictures and things. I think we've got such a lot of beautiful pictures that could have been in there, but we've got to move on and we've got to go with it. And the only thing that I would hope that it's printed in Gawler at our Gawler printers. And if it's not, I won't be very happy, but I'll certainly endorse and support this motion.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this matter, Councillor Fraser?
Just quickly, I agree with what the others have said, but we've been working on this since February, so it is time to put it out for the public to have their say.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Tooley?
Yeah, I disagree that this should be the most important document. I think the most important document to drive everything in our council should be the climate emergency action plan. And I guess that's my biggest criticism of this document, is that it looks lovely in that, again, it's a bog standard plan. It has goals, it has coloured headings, and it uses things like our community and our environment and our growth, typically what you'd expect. But it screams to me that we're not realising the situation that we're in. You know, it's a bit like Donald Trump and his denial of the COVID. It'll just go away. We'll just carry on with a community plan. We've got COVID and we've got climate change screaming at us for radical and urgent changes, not a typical bog standard plan. To me, this community plan lacks any real understanding and acceptance of the disastrous health, economic, and environmental devastation that is our current reality due to climate change and what is now happening in our community. Attenborough is just releasing his latest documentary on the death of the species. Have a look at that. It's BBC. Have a look at the amount of species loss. And he talks about what the impacts of that are globally for all of us. We've just seen, we're living through the pandemic. Climate change leads to and facilitates pandemics. It creates the perfect environment for plagues and pandemics. Just this week, one of the largest chunks ever fell off the Greenland ice sheet. As it disintegrates, the impact of that on sea rise will be in meters. Can you imagine Charles Sturt doing a plan like this that gives tacit mention to the impacts of coastal erosion and flooding? Right now, in Venice, in New Orleans, they are spending billions on seawalls that will not hold the water back. We should be waking up to the situation and giving this a radical rewrite, not a tweaking of the existing template that we've used for years. Even when I look at the section on environment, what do I see at the top? It talks about a biodiversity management plan. A little bit further down, there's a mention of the climate emergency action plan. Even in the environmental section, there's not a waking up, a recognition that this is the most significant issue that we're facing. And so in many ways, what we've got here is a plan that is just typical of what we've done before. We talk about risk management on council. It's regularly in the financial reports. We have an obligation to minimise risk. We have an obligation to keep our community safe. Well, that should be just enough of a trigger for us to upend this and rewrite it radically on the basis of what the risk to us is of the ongoing impacts of climate change. They are economic, they are health, they are environmental. And I've been singing this song, you know, don't say to me, well, Ian, why are you mentioning this now? I have mentioned this to this council for 6 years. I send you guys regularly, I've given up lately because I feel like I'm just hitting my head on the wall. I regularly would send you links to information of what other mayors, what other councils, what other jurisdictions are doing around the world to make radical change and radical difference. And I send you images and pictures of those things.
30 seconds, thank you, Ian.
And I've given up, I'm worn out because I'm not getting anywhere. And it doesn't matter what I say or do or what I bring to you or what I shock you with. It wouldn't make any difference. That's the sad thing. I've just been part of training 10,000 people worldwide. And I could show you on a slideshow, I can give you a climate change presentation that you'd lose sleep. If you were willing to look at it and take it on board, you would gasp with how dangerous the situation is. There is a solution, there is hope, but it's ticking at one second to midnight. Once we get past the tipping points, there's no coming back, and future generations will look at us and say, you could have, but you didn't. And our community plan, if we're saying this is the most important plan, then this should be screaming at action on climate change. But I believe it should be second to the climate emergency action plan that we develop. That's how critical this is. And I don't know what it's going to take to make you guys wake up to this.
Thank you, Councillor Koch.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm quite happy with this plan because it's an overarching document and it does take into account all the other documents, all the other plans. We've got biodiversity plan, climate emergency plan, et cetera. The world is awake to climate change and the world is tackling it at the speed that it needs to, a speed that it's capable of tackling it. Radical change will not cause behavioural change. We've seen that. We've seen that with COVID. People need to change their behaviour incrementally. You know, we need to do it quickly, but incrementally. We've seen with COVID, if you put too many restrictions on people, they arc up and they sort of want to say, we can't do this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same with climate change. If you try to scare people all the time and try to drag them down some message that you want to give them, people arc up. That's the reality. And I've seen it. I've been involved in behavioural change professionally for 30 years. You don't do it that way. You do it the way we're doing it. You take people along the journey. You don't scream at them. So I'm quite happy to support this plan, and I think it embeds our community into a good future. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Thank you. Do you have a hand up, Councillor Little? No? Okay. Councillor Hughes, you can close the debate. Happy? Put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against? It is carried. Thank you. Moving on to 11.9, Gawler East Link Road update. Our tour's been cancelled, Mr. Delina. Apparently at 6 o'clock this evening. I'm sure you'll let everyone know in due course. I thought I'd let everyone know now. Yeah. It's been cancelled, apparently. Yeah, apparently. Anyway, I'm sure Mr. Delina will update us. So we have our reports. Thank you to Tracy Hanson and for this report and your team, Sam. We have our officer's recommendation. I might ask from, are you happy to move? I'll see if I can get a mover and second to mover. If you're happy to move, do you wish to speak at all?
Yeah, just to say that, look, there's a few costs here, but these are the kinds of costs that residents seem to be very happy when we make footpaths and noise reduction and light pollution reduction and that for local residents. So I'm happy to support this.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hughes, do you wish to speak at all?
Just agreeing with Councillor Davies. Yeah, there is some important minor works that need to be carried out. So, and yes, the nearby residents have asked for it. So, and our community needs these. So, they're happy to support.
Thank you. We had a question, Councillor Fraser.
I went along Potts Road today. First of all, I was impressed because it looks a lot better than what I thought it was ever going to look. But I was trying to find the bus stop. I couldn't find where the bus stop was going to be at all.
Mr. Delina, enlighten us. We're not going to be able to see it. We couldn't get out the bus anyway. Can't be trusted without steel cap boots on.
Through you, I probably won't answer that particular question, but what I'll do is might take that on notice and actually issue a plan to members showing the location. I believe it's down by the Main North Road on the northern side, but I'll just confirm that. And possibly the actual bus stop post may have not been, the flag may have not been up, but I'll double check and issue an update to members.
It's just that all the footpaths look to be in really good nick. And then I think well, there's obviously a section where it's not, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sample, then Councillor Tooley.
Thank you, Mayor. Karen, on page 58, it's got a graffiti on the wall called Waretta. That's number one question. The number two question is on page 60. There's to do with the service station and everything that's going to be built there. It's noted that works will cost approximately $21,000. Sam, first of all, what's the signage on page 58, and are we paying the $21,000? Is that an extra cost to us to not be able to see the service station?
Mr. Delina, thank you.
Through you, Mayor. I think you're just looking for some clarification as to what photo one on page 58 is that right?
It's only one photo.
It's got Waretta.
It's the Aboriginal signage.
Correct. Yeah. So that screen per se is the screen to assist shield the residents at Selway, the Selway resident group that had some concerns about overlooking of the road because of going over the flood control dams quite high and looking to their backyards. So rather than install a colour-bond fence, which was originally proposed, DIPTI, to their credit, have taken on board some feedback, have engaged with their in-house landscape architect who has a Aboriginal heritage and has sought to incorporate a artistic screen per se. What you see there is just after it's been installed, there'll be some landscaping that'll be placed around it, and that will weather and become that, it's a cordon steel, which is that rusted steel look per se. Yeah. So there was some previous commentary provided in earlier reports, but I understand Warette was known as the last female Gawler Aboriginal person from this area, per se Indigenous to this local area, and there was some reference to that in a previous report, Council. So there's some symbols that have been shown on the screens, which I was hoping to have taken you past tomorrow, but as of late tonight, the Department of Infrastructure and Transport have cancelled our bus tour for tomorrow. So apologies about that. It's quite frustrating and disappointing.
And the service station, I think you had another question, Councillor Samble, about
Yeah.
the service station.
So just in regards to the street tree, the additional trees, so that was as a result of some concerns of existing residents in Phillips Avenue in regards to how we might address some potential light spill, notwithstanding the fact that it was over and above what there wasn't any demonstrated need through the planning studies being done. The council, as a sign of goodwill, undertook to do some additional planting and authorise that. So this is just confirming the actual dollars allocated for those 25 trees to be planted, but also maintained for a year. So watered every 2 weeks through the irrigation summer period.
Thank you.
Sorry, 25 trees, that's 21,000 for 25 trees. Geez, they must be gold plated.
So
I think you've answered that question. Thank you, Mr. Delena. Councillor Tooley.
Yeah, that's the reason I'm going to vote against this motion. Again, it's just an example of waste. As Mr. Delena has said, it wasn't needed. All of the money we spent on proper consultants, light spill, sound spilling data said there is not an issue. We already have a slightly elevated mound at the end of Councillor Koch's road, and it has some trees on it, Phillips Avenue. If you go from Councillor Samble's place along, you'll see it's quite wooded all the way along. My memory is they were planted with tube stock. And when I ride my bike down through Dead Man's Pass, I see the plantings that have been put in, very visible because of the green triangles that are around them. And I see this every year as someone, I don't know if it's council, I presume it's council, is continuing to revegetate, and they get a good go. Those little triangles give some catchment. That little tube stock takes off. And then I see later on, next year, the tube stock seems to come off and 80% of them will flourish. I cannot believe that we could not get there, buy some tube stock, or even one of Councillor Koch's Friends of the Earth groups that grow trees, get out there and put some tube stock in. Hundreds, not thousands. Tube stock's not that dear, and tube stock's the best stuff to put in. It requires less maintenance. It takes in the groundwater, and they grow very quickly. You'd have that covered if you got the right species in there. But we do this Rolls-Royce approach, and I'm presuming that this maintenance, are we outsourcing that, or is that the cost of our own employees maintaining that? Is that outsourced? Here we go. We got a depot. We got staff. We've got a percentage of our staff are on contracts. But we just, we saw in the Bunyip recently, the commentary on that was $280,000 thrown at legal fees. And we throw more money at Rolls-Royce consultants. When we get to Walker Place, I've got some questions about Walker Place. The millions we've thrown at that. And I don't know, do you guys read the feedback? I mean, we often do our own community feedback, and if we don't like it, we reject it. Do you not read what people are saying on Facebook about what we do and the waste? And we're just giving another example. 21 grand for 25 trees that aren't even needed. Our own report said they're not needed. So, no, I can't support that. And I hope that the community listening, I am not supporting that waste. If we were going to do anything, I'd send some depot staff out with some tube stock and whack them in. And the majority of them would take it. Based on the groundwater and the rain that's coming, we're going to have a very wet spring, they tell us. Here endeth my rant.
Any other discussion? Councillor Court.
In fact, it's just a noting. In fact, the trees are already planted. And the reason why you put in mature trees is to get coverage quickly and you get the trees where you want them. And by watering for the first year, they become established. They get their roots down because you water them deeply. So what happens is the roots actually go down, and then they're established, and then they're away. So it will create a good barrier there for those houses on the corner, because I'm sure they're concerned, especially if you've got a petrol station popping up across the road from you. So I know it's a noting. I would say I declared a perceived conflict when this first came up, and that was a decision about spending the money. So at the moment, so that's why I haven't declared a perceived, because it's just a noting. So yes, so I'll be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Davies.
Yeah, so as was mentioned before, the trees are, we're not voting on the trees here. This is just noting that the trees have happened. The only thing that we're sorting out here is supports $9,000 for the installation of asphalt on the Potts Road verge, which I think residents quite like the idea of there being more works done on Potts Road, to be honest. So I think that's reasonable. And look, it is important that we avoid waste. We can't decide everything based on what certain comment sections on Facebook say, because look, that we passed a motion about what was it called? The review for climate change and looking at the pool and other things and saying, oh, this is great, we're going to save a lot of money. That went up on Facebook, and finding a comment section was like, wasting money again. And that's just their default reaction to everything on that Facebook page. Like, we were saving money. That's the whole point of the article, and why we all voted unanimously for it. So look, some things we should be looking at, but not everything is a waste of money. And I think more supply and installation of asphalt on the Potts Road verge is something that I'm happy to support.
Thank you. The debate's closed. To put that motion, all those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against, the motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we move on to 11:10, and I'm on page 66. So we've got a review of our disability access and inclusion plan. You happy to move that way? You happy to second, Councillor Tilley? No question. I'll see if I can get, so Councillor Hughes, you wish to speak at all?
Just briefly, I think it's very important that this goes out, we need to get this rolling, and it's really important for our town as well. For access around our town is sometimes very difficult, so this is important document.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? You had your hand up, I think, Councillor Koch. He's happy to second. Okay, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, look, I think accessibility in our town for people with disabilities is extremely important. As you know, I'm involved with the RSB, and I suppose I'm quite conscious of access ramps, etc., and the effect that has on people with a disability, especially people with impaired sight. So I'm obviously quite keen that this has been supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, who had the question? I think Councillor Tilley, you had a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, two questions. were any of the key focus groups affected in our town consulted in the development of this revised plan?
Erin?
Yeah, through the Mayor, in this particular case, they weren't. So basically the plan's been realigned to fit with the new state legislation. So there hasn't been major changes. So what we're looking to do is just really inform about how it's slightly been realigned. So this time it wasn't a whole review of the plan, it was just a slight change. So when we review the plan again in a couple of years, that will obviously happen.
Thank you. Subsequent question.
It says it's going out for consultation. Will you specifically target the focus groups that are most affected by this?
Yeah, so through the Mayor, yes, we will. So obviously Linda has a group of stakeholders that were particularly referenced last time when we delivered the plan. And so we'll be looking to those people, and also particular community organisations that we know this plan is really relevant to. So we'll be making sure that consultation goes out to the right people as well as general community.
Thank you. You wish to speak?
With those assurances, I'm happy to support this. I don't know about you, but I've been here many times when Lynn Lillycrap, who is a very, very strong advocate for the, I don't know if the word sector is the right word, but for people who have mobility issues, fall into that category of the disabled. And she's quite strongly reminded us that we're lacking in many, many areas. And I look to someone like her who looks at these documents through the lens of someone who's on the receiving end. That's their life. And, you know, we're not bound to a wheelchair. We don't have mobility issues. We're not sight and sound constrained. And so we don't see it. But Lynn has made some very passionate presentations to us that's opened our eyes and certainly opened my eyes far more. You know, what we take for granted is simply walking on some of our footpaths. And I can understand their point of view where they would say, why do we spend $21,000 on trees? Why do we spend $200,000 on contributory items? Why do we worry about boundary reform when their life is very difficult because they just can't get around, can't get up a set of steps, can't get into a shop, can't go on a level footpath. And, you know, I guess if we walked in their shoes, if we saw things through their eyes, maybe we would prioritise more of those. We've deliberated over whether we'd put a lift in at the Vic Centre. And, you know, we've justified, well, we don't have to. The rules say we actually don't have to. And we've sort of, you know, made do with that. But I reckon if we looked from their perspective, we might flip that. And we might say, you know what, we should start making some of these things more of a priority. Maybe we should really, in our budget process, maybe we should have a column that says, in this budget, we are addressing our shortfalls in relation to the needs of those in our community who are disabled. That might be a really good thing. And if that comes back from this, maybe, that could be good. That would show us to be a far more caring and connected and compassionate council.
Thank you. Any other discussion? There be none. Councillor Hughes, did you move the motion? It's not up there. Thank you. Do you want to close the debate? Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we're moving on to 1111 on page 72, Legislative Review Committee Submission Planning Reform. We have as an officer's recommendation here. You happy to move that way, Councillor Samble? Do you wish to speak at all? Thank you. Do I have a thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goldstone, do you wish to speak? Any other discussion? Councillor Tooley?
My first question is this essentially the town of Gawler's submission to the government on the planning reforms?
It's the Legislative Review Committee. It's a Legislative Review Committee. So you got that question. What? Do you have other question? You had a couple of questions.
Yeah, the title's planning reform.
Yeah, it's on planning, but it's a submission to the Legislative Review Committee that's looking at the planning reform. So it's a committee of Parliament.
I'll reframe the question. Is our submission here influenced by and based on the money we spent on the research around contributory items? Has that research and that report informed our submission and our proposal that I'm reading here?
Well, this is a broad-based submission. Jane, Jane Strange, are you able to address that second question? The first question I think has been answered, that there is a committee that has commissioned an inquiry into planning reform following lodgement of petition number 2. Submissions are invited by anyone with an interest in the planning reforms. So that's the very first paragraph of the summary. But the subsequent question around cost and informing, if you could answer that, Ms. Strange, thank you.
Through the Mayor, no. There were specific criteria given by the committee, which we answered, and it was not guided by the cost of the development plan amendment and what council put to one side to spend on that last year.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm still confused, and
thank you,
I'd just like a simple answer. We invested $200,000 to do a big research on contributory items. We did it around about the changes to the Planning Act. That's how it was wrapped to us, Planning Act. So I see here planning reform. Is that something separate that's ongoing, or is this the result? And I'm looking to Ryan because this is his area. Is this the result of all of those investigations that we're making this submission?
No, this is a submission on the planning reforms overall. So as Jane just said, there's specific criteria that the committee has requested.
But it talks about contributory items.
Yeah, but that's part of the planning reforms. But the DPA that we're doing is separate to that. And that money that we've allocated is separate. This is a submission looking at planning reforms overall, and it's quite detailed in what that submission is, and it's in there in our papers.
So our work on contributory items is embedded in this. It's part of this report.
Our position on contributory items is in this submission. That's my understanding. Our investigations need to come back, don't they, Ryan? That's correct. So that will be subject of a future report. Thank you.
Say that bit again. There's another report. Did you say?
The DPA, the investigations around contributory items and transitioning to local heritage places, and that DPA will come back when it's ready to come back at a future council meeting. Yeah. This is a separate submission on planning reforms overall to a committee looking into planning reform.
And that planning reform was connected to this whole issue that we've been looking at, where we've been very concerned about contributory items.
That's a separate body of work. This is overarching planning reforms.
But is that separate body work part of the whole picture?
Well, no, you're asking whether the money from that DPA has been used to write the submission, and Jane said no, quite clearly.
No, I didn't ask that.
So any other questions?
See, this is what you do, Mayor. I'm trying to be informed about what I'm voting on.
I'm giving you an answer.
And it wasn't, you're obviously not giving me a good enough one because it's not clear. I read in here about contributory items. I know that we spent money on
and I've said
items.
that that's a separate body of work. So this is a submission.
That work, my point is not about the money spent. My point is,
you did ask
has that report informed this report? Is it? I wish I'd rung Ryan. I could get a clear answer out of Ryan, but I can't get a clear one out of you. And yet you want us to make a vote on something but you won't let us get clarification.
So
You're so process driven.
Do you wish to speak to the item, Councillor?
See, here we go. I'd like to speak to the item. Yeah, give me 5 minutes. I will.
Excellent.
Yep. And I will vote against it, Mayor, because I can't get a clear answer from you or from anybody. What I'm trying to work out is what has come before us many times is a big expenditure item of 200,000 about contributory items. I saw that report, pictures of every item in the town. And we've had many discussions in here about the rotting infrastructure in this town of its historic nature that's not getting addressed. That spurned from me a motion that said, let's do something sensible. It may come up in the next council meeting about how we could get our historic walls by hiring a stonemason, if you remember that presentation. That all came out of that money that we spent. What I read in this, and which you won't allow me to get clarification because it's not clear, and what you should do as a mayor is if members of your council don't understand, you should be helping to facilitate their understanding rather than just being so rules and process driven. And have you got another question, Councillor Tooley? That is rude. It's condescending. It's not facilitating good decision making. In here, I read about contributory items. That report then, I assume, has fed into this. The point I would make in our submission is that we are not going to get, as we're not getting with any of the stuff on the contributory items, we are not going to get a good outcome that achieves what we want. We're still seeing our ancient infrastructure that we all love rotting away. We're not seeing anything that's spending good money to actually achieve the outcome we want. We want the hundreds of historic walls restored. We want the buildings that sit on people's properties that they can't do anything with because either they are completely beyond hope, unless you've got millions of dollars to restore them, they will never be restored. So what does the owner do? Lets them rot. That doesn't achieve what we want. What it does, it frustrates for the owners. They can't get on and get the development done. And then I've seen here, even when our CAP approves something, we get some people from the community going to the EID court, people associated with this council, to try and slow that down again and frustrate those people even further. What we should be doing is saying, look, the system hasn't worked. There are some items which are so far gone, they were never built by our forefathers and foremothers to last. They were built out of limestone with a bit of sand. They never thought they'd last for more than a couple of years. They have no foundation, they have no waterproofing, they're not earthquake proof. They should be allowed to be demolished. And the ones that are worth saving, we should be having a strategy to do something about it. Now, that's what I think we should be saying to a commission. That's the logical common sense that we should be saying to those that are doing the legislation. And that 200 grand that we invested, which obviously I think I've worked out, has informed part of this. What benefit will come from that for our town? Just another expenditure with no tangible outcome. It's just frustrating. It's a frustrating waste of money, and it's frustrating when we just don't have a principal member who's focused on trying to facilitate good discussion and clarification. It's all about let's use the rules and regulations. Shut up, Councillor Tooley, your time's up. What's your next question? You could have let me ask a good question of Ryan, and I may have got a good answer.
So have you finished speaking to the item?
Perfect.
Thank
Perfect,
you.
mate. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Koch.
Thank you. I won't be arguing it.
Just press it on.
Sorry, I won't be arcing up and talking about something completely different. I'll be supporting this submission because I think the planning reforms have gone too far and really have allowed potentially developers to run riot over our planning. In particular, it takes away the rights of the community to make decisions about what happens in their community. I think there's concerns about sustainability because our tree covers are dropping, especially when we have to when considering climate change, what we have to do about it. I think it's important that we have deep earth so we can actually get plants growing into the ground and into the groundwater. I agree with, again, the heritage. I agree that there's an issue there. I think a lot of our heritage buildings are under threat. There's lack of environmental protection. And I suppose the last one I would like to say is I think it'd be a good idea if developers didn't give donations to political parties like they do in New South Wales, because we've seen what happened. We've seen a lot of ministers over there put in jail because of developers. So I think that's a pretty good thing as well. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Little.
Yeah, I'll be speaking against the motion for the following points. I believe that we retain a lot of our so-called heritage items that are not heritage. I agree with Councillor Twilley in certain areas. I don't know about you guys, I've been contacted by a lot of landowners who own some of these walls that were built to last 20 years, and we're trying to preserve something that's now 50 years old. I think we need to allocate our funds to a better situation, and I think why the state government is going to this point of doing what they're doing is because I think they're getting people from all neighbourhoods and councils afraid of trying to do improvements on their property because of costs involved. So I'll be speaking against the motion.
Thank you. Any other discussion? There being none, Councillor Sample, are you happy for me to put the motion? Thank you. The debate is closed. I put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, it is carried. Thank you. Now moving on to 11.12 on page 79, Councillor Goldstone.
To declare an interest in this item.
Yes.
A perceived conflict of interest as I'm a member of the council's assessment panel, which will consider any future development application relating to the trees removal.
So how do you wish to deal with it?
I'm going to leave the meeting.
Leave the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Goldstone. We'll allow Councillor Goldstone to leave the meeting. Thank you, Kate. Okay, so we have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Ballawonga, do you wish to move the motion? Do you wish to speak? No? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sample, do you wish to speak? Any other discussion? Councillor Fraser.
Point 2, to have for the developer to reinstate trees to the development site in the future. Is that next year or the next 10 years or the next 20 years? I would really like to see that to be more specifically noted.
Mr. Viney? Or is it you, Sam?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. And to the point in regards to whether we can make it more specific, it's a little difficult. The developer is locked into a delivery deed, which requires them to upgrade Clark Road to a collector road standard. So it's incumbent within that standard that there'd be street trees provided, particularly given they're removing a significant amount of trees. So I can't give you a date, unfortunately. It is development is related to the rate of development of Orleana, which is slowed in the current economic conditions, but it's likely to be 1 to 2 years away. As I understand it now, it's likely to be 1 to 2 years away.
Thank you. Any other discussion, Councillor Kosh?
I'll be voting against this. As people know, I'm an arborist. And you can actually work under trees without damaging them. And there's a thing called hydrovac. And if you remember, they did that on Main North Road at the Williston roundabout. They hydrovac those eucalypts there and actually went underneath it. And you can do that without damaging the tree. I've also been involved in tunnelling, where I've recommended that tunnelling occurs under trees. And that's been very, very successful. There was some trees up in Eden Valley I was looking after, and in the end we tunnelled underneath those trees, and the trees were saved, so that was pretty good. So there's other alternatives, and in my opinion, well, I suppose I can't say that, but what I would say is I would prefer if techniques such as hydrovacuum or tunnelling was used instead. So I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Davies.
Yeah, so just a question in relation to, do we know the viability of working around the tree as opposed to removing it?
Mr. Delina?
Not so far as I know that my officers have been on site with the developers, engineers, and the developer, and have sought to actively do what we could to preserve the tree. And the effectively the advice that's been provided is that that physically can't occur with the quantum of excavation that's required in that area to form the common service trench, which is quite a substantial trench through that area. Notwithstanding the fact, it's likely that the officers would be recommending potentially the tree removal as part of to facilitate a future footpath through that area or shed path, because those trees were planted as a screen back in the day, not planted as a street tree catering for a potential footpath. So in terms of its placement, not being considerate of where you would plant a tree, if you're going to do it in a, allowing for a footpath. So it's likely at some point in the future, we'd actually be seeking for it to be removed regardless. That's the other consideration that probably needs to be thought. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Ballalonga, are you happy for me to put the motion? Thank you. Debate's closed. Put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? It is carried. Somebody could ask Councillor Goldstone to come back in, please. Thanks, Jim. So now we're on 1113, which is on page 83. And this is the annual report of the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority. We're noting that Councillor Kosh, are you happy to move that motion? Do you wish to speak at all? No. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Little, do you wish to speak at all? No. No? All good? Any discussion? Councillor Tooley?
Yeah, I'm speaking against the annual report. I was flabbergasted when we had a representation from this group speak to us not that long ago. And I asked the question, to what degree do they take into account, or have they taken into account risk management associated with climate change, and what sort of modelling? And I expressed my shock at the time. The answer was, well, we haven't. We've used the existing modelling about the 100-year floods and those sort of things. Can you believe that? Can you believe in this day and age that the flood management group, with everything that's happened, would not have looked at current trends and issues in risk management? Both my sons are engineers, very highly credited, both here and in the States. And I talk to them all the time, and they are water specialists. And they say, Dad, we can't, we would be shot if we didn't include proper risk management in our planning. We would be shot. One of them's heading up the whole water infrastructure for Seattle. And they are a very progressive state, Washington State. The mayor of Seattle is stunningly progressive around climate change. I was flabbergasted. Our own bureau has already put out a warning. You read it in the local press. They've already put out a warning that expect floods, expect the 218 flood again downstream. We've had the growers report it again in the media saying we've changed the way we're thinking about our crops, because if this flood's going to come down again, and certainly the money hasn't been spent to mitigate against it. And this is the annual report from the group that are planning to spend loads of money millions possibly, and they're factoring it on antiquated data. No civil engineering company worth its salt, SKM, GHD, Jacobs, none of them would do that based on old stuff. They use the latest modeling in their planning and their preparation. Insurance companies have told us, if you allow development in areas that are going to be smashed because of climate change and you haven't factored in, we'll come after you as a council. We'll get our money back. Whether you're a seafront council, or in this case, we're a riverine council. And we spend a lot of money. We contribute to this group. And it looks like we've got antiquated thinking driving it. So, no, not from me, thank you. I'd like to be on record.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Koch, happy for me to put the motion. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? It is carried. Councillor Tooley has called a division. All those in favour, please stand. All those against, stay seated. All those in favour are Councillor Davies, Councillor Koch, Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Little, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Samble, and Councillor Fraser. Keep standing, please. Stay standing. All those against are Councillor Vallelonga and Councillor Tooley. The motion is carried. Thank you. You may take your seats. So now that concludes that matter. Now we'll move on to recommendations from committees. I think at this juncture we might have a 10-minute break and just stretch our legs. And, so Kate, just I think, yeah, and we'll resume at 9 p.m. Thank you. I think it's good to have a bit of a break. Move.
Time, please, gentlemen. Councillor Sterling, please take a seat.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Okay. So page 88 of our agenda, recommendations from committees. We've got the Gawler Youth Advisory Committee meeting held on the 7th of September. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, so happy to move the motion, and I'll just pointing out the one about the business case for a youth space-based traineeship program. So they submitted this last year, and obviously a lot changed with the budget, so it ended up below the line, but they have they are intending to try and submit it again for this upcoming budget.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Fraser, do you wish to speak at all? Any discussion? If not, Councillor Davies, you happy for me to put that motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Can you? We'll just do that again. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the Gawler Heritage Committee. We have some motions made under delegated authority for noting. Happy to move that way, Councillor Fraser. Happy to second, Councillor Hughes. Any discussion? Mover, do you wish to speak at all? Seconder? Yeah. Do you wish to speak at all? No. Councillor Sample?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I went in the other day and had a look at the fantastic display, but I found nowhere to put my coins in. I just wanted to leave a donation. I'm just wondering how the donations are coming along.
Is there a
I said
swipe
it was
card?
715, so there should be $715 in there.
David?
So through the chair, we're waiting for supply from Melbourne. Unfortunately, the company with supply has been in lockdown because of COVID-19. We are expecting them within the next 2 weeks. They've just come back on deck.
Thank you. So not far away, I think Councillor Samble's the answer to that. Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Fraser, are you happy for me to put that motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We have a recommendation over the page from the same committee. You happy to move that way, Councillor Hughes? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Little, do you wish to speak at all?
Just briefly, I think this is really important and really good to acknowledge that the Heritage Collection Committee is also talking to local Kaurna people, because there's lots of sensitivities about any artefacts, any items, and I think it's very important that the Heritage Committee is on the front foot with this, and this statement is quite a powerful and proper statement to be making. So yeah, very, very happy to see it.
Thank you. Councillor Little, do you wish to speak as the seconder? No. Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Hughes, you happy for me to put the motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And 12.2.2, deaccessioning report. Councillor Kosh, you happy to move? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goldstone, do you wish to speak at all? Councillor Goldstone, any other discussion? If not, you happy for me to put that motion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we move on to external body reports. And the first one is the Reconciliation Action Plan Working Group meeting notes. That we note the meeting notes. Councillor Little, happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hughes, any discussion? If not, put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Climate Emergency Action Plan Working Group meeting And we note the minutes. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Davies. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Kosh. Any discussion? Councillor Davies.
Yeah, just to say that I know there's been discussion before about having the latest version of the minutes, and obviously these are from August, so that did come up for discussion at the last meeting. Basically, the issue is that our meeting is the Wednesday night before council, and then on Thursday morning the sort of agenda is due. So we're going to send out some just scheduling stuff to see if we can get a better day, because if it was even one day before, it wouldn't run into such a problem, but it's sort of right on the limit of where it ends up being pushed a month back.
So that you're hoping that might change?
Yeah, depending on both the schedules of all of the committee members and what regular schedule spots we can find within the council's diary. So.
Okay, working on it. Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Davies, you happy for me? I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against? We'll just do that again. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, done that. Now we move on to, I don't have any questions on notice. Questions without notice. Are there any questions? Councillor Fraser.
Yes, the swimming pool, the front wall, street wall, is that going to stay white or is something going to be put over it? It's very stark. It's not,
looks
I don't
like it needs a
particularly
good
like
paint.
it. Pardon?
It looks like it needs a good paint. Mr. Delina, I must admit that crossed my mind. It looked like it needed at least 3 extra coats of white paint on it.
Through the chair, I might take that one on notice. I believe that is the final colour, but I will confirm that. I believe that is the final colour, but I will confirm that.
Any other questions? Councillor Sandel.
Mayor Karen, there was an article in the opposition paper, The Leader, the other week supporting Gawler's homeless. And, you know, I've heard Councillor Tooley talk about the homeless people in the town and things like this. I mean, as a council, we should be aware of these sort of things. I don't think anybody in the room knows of it, but there's quite a large working group, and it said that there is at least 150 people in Gawler who are homeless and sleeping rough each night. And there's a committee group people and they have fundraising and everything, the whole lot. And I'm just wondering and bringing it to your attention whether people know about this.
Councillor Fraser knows a lot about it. So
Sorry.
I might allow
The homeless, it's
Well,
a forum.
That's the heading.
And the chair of the Gawler Community House is actually on that forum, and I've got a feeling Tony Piccolo's on it as well.
And so's council
And they're-
staff.
Pardon?
And council staff are, but we don't
Are
get any
they?
updates on
And they're
it.
trying to get a room or something, is that right? A room or something?
We don't get any updates on it though. That's the only thing I'd say.
No, so if I can, sorry, through the mayor, we actually do have a response to Councillor Tooley's motion without notice coming to the 29th special council meeting regarding homelessness in Gawler, and it addresses this group specifically as well.
It would be good to get regular updates if staff are going to these forums so that at least we, you know, people like Councillor Samble and myself as mayor actually get briefed on it.
Yep, certainly can do that.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions without notice? Councillor Tooley and then Councillor Kosh.
I'm happy to have them rotated. My first question relates to Walker Place. Two questions. I don't know about other councillors, but I regularly get people from the community talking to me about a range of issues. Walker Place seems to come up an awful lot. The 2 latest questions I couldn't answer for them were, number one, it appeared from the paving layout that there were going to be more car parks, and yet a number at the western end have bollards which prevent any access from vehicles. I would say almost half of what's on the southern side is blocked off with bollards. It's not protecting any seating. There's no seating in that area. So that was one question. Why are those bollards blocking what could be parking in that area? And the second is the outrage over the yellow stripes. They saw a very expensive paving go in, quite attractive paving, and then in two swathes on both sides, there are these almost a zebra crossing of thick, gaudy, yellow paint. So can we have an explanation? I have other questions, but they're my first two questions regarding the bollards and the paint.
You want to take them on notice, or are you happy to answer them? Okay.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. First question relates to an area of paving where we could potentially facilitate additional car parking. That wasn't initially within the considerations per se when the layout was consulted and proposed. I know that staff have reconsidered that, looked at the arrangements in that area, and are actually looking to transition and provide 2 additional car parks in that area by removing 2 bollards. And it would allow for, it still maintains the functionality of the space, allows for the events in the future, and actually just creates a couple of additional car parks. There's no furniture in that space, so probably in hindsight, they should have been provided for to start with. So they're in the process of being transitioned to car parks. In regards to the yellow line marks that were in placed, they were as a consequence of some really poor driver parking behaviour. We had a number of vehicles parking in spots that were inappropriate, and the yellow lines were seen as the initially avoided. Up front, we try to avoid putting them there as what you would do on an urban road under normal circumstances, and was seen as really not much alternative to try and stop some really poor behaviour with respect to where vehicles were just attempting to park.
Right. Okay. It just seems we've spent so much money on it, and I tend to agree with Councillor Tooley that, you know, really expensive paving, they weren't cheap. I might go to Councillor Fraser, and then I think Councillor Tooley, you've got one more question. Yeah.
Mine's about Walker's Place.
Yeah.
If we put 2 more car parks in, people won't sit, if there's too many cars in there, people won't sit in there in their lunchtime and enjoy their lunch. I mean, the last week it's been a bit cold and windy, but when the weather's nicer, if it's more open, it'll get used more. But if we just fill it up with cars, it's just going to become a car park and nobody will use that seating.
So I'm just happy to clarify that there's been no infrastructure that's been moved other than I think 3 bollards per se, and vehicles were attempting to go between the bollards and park in these areas. The additional, all the seating that remains exactly as it is, and the reason that there wasn't any infrastructure in there is that in future, that whole area under those decorative lights where this additional space capacity is, was proposed to be free for the stage to be set up. So effectively, it makes sense that you could return the car parks in the interim. There's no infrastructure there for, you know, pedestrian public realm use now. It's really just for those events.
Okay. Councillor Tooley. So I'll hand back to Councillor Tooley. You've got another question?
Yep. Can we have, we've been waiting for an update on the abysmal spraying of weeds in Pioneer Park, and I've taken many photographs since we were first alerted, and there is no way that that's an act of vandalism. It is systematic spraying of the edges of footpaths and garden beds. It's a mistake by either a staff member or a contractor, and the video record will show that. There is no way a vandal has gone in there and gone to that trouble in inaccessible areas around edges. What we do have is someone who either read the instructions wrong or didn't care or set the nozzle too broad when they meant to do a couple of centimetres around the edge.
Okay.
So can we have an update? We were promised an update. We were promised that there would be a review, and we haven't heard anything.
I think we might take that one on notice, Mr. Delina, because there has been some email traffic, but I'm happy for you to take that on notice. We can get a timely response back to the elected members. Yep, okay, thank you, thank you. Now, I'll go to Councillor Koch because he's been waiting very patiently, and then I'll come back to Councillor Samble.
Yeah, I suppose this is to Sam. What's the council's approach to controlling fountain grass and gazania? Because they're out of control in a lot of places.
You want to take that on notice? It might be.
I will say we have a targeted weed program. I don't know what our current approach is, and
We'll take that on notice and get a detailed answer to that question on those weeds. Now, Councillor Samble, you had a question? You had a question?
I'm a bit bewildered. I mean, the question's been asked. It was asked when the incident happened at Pioneer Park. And I would have thought we would have at least got an answer. I agree with Councillor Tooley. I mean, it doesn't take too long to be able to sort of work out what's going on. There must be some reason, because I'm certainly getting phone calls. I can't go shopping. I now go to Murrapara because I'm just sick to death of people saying, well, hang on a minute, what happened up there? You know, how come the grasses aren't growing out of the rusted fingernail? All these sort of things. I'd rather go somewhere else and shop.
We'll wait
So
for the,
we
we'll wait
need
for
to
the
get
answer.
that answer that Councillor Tooley.
Yes, thank you.
Should
But
be-
we will get
should
that.
be told
We
here
will get
tonight.
that. Thank you. Any other questions without notice, Councillor Tooley?
Last one of the set of three. When a petition was presented recently by the business owners regarding parking issues, it triggered an action and a response, part of which was changing to parking and a delegation to the owners of Big W. There was a petition presented last week, last council meeting, regarding a certain council member and 134 people demanding some action. What's going to happen?
CEO?
Well, as by my response to yourself, Councillor Tooley, which was copied to all members, it's not common practice that for the administration to jump to actioning a petition. Depending on when the petition is presented, it's invariably for the members to either at the council presenting a motion without notice, or subsequently a motion with notice for the matter to then be subsequently pursued and considered. So that's generally what happens with petitions.
Thank you.
If I might, but as I said at the beginning, this administration responded to the petition about parking. It was a petition. People wrote, submitted the petition. They stood at that podium, and it didn't follow with a motion. The administration responded. Just like the administration responded, the members didn't ask you to respond when you tried to kick me off council. You invoked section 54 because you're the administration when I was not granted leave.
So
the administration chooses what it wants to do.
CEO, if you could just provide that response again, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Well, again, as I've communicated in the email that was circulated, it's really for council to consider what and how it wishes to pursue matters presented by petitions. That's been the normal practice. Whether by exception there have been examples, I'll have to take that on notice, but it's convention that council turns its mind to petitions, and council, by way of motions on notice or without notice, then seeks matters to be addressed.
Thank you. So we're moving
forward to your answer, because I just gave you a perfect example. The members, Ashley, Grace and others, stood there,
any other
presented the
questions,
petition, and you
elected
acted on
member?
it.
Any other questions, elected members? So I'm going to move on from questions without notice. Thank you. We now have a motion on notice from Councillor Davies. You happy to withdraw that? So we'll just note that, Kate. Thank you. Motions without notice. We're moving on to confidential reports now. And we Okay, where's my... And we have a recommendation to go into confidence to discuss this next item. Councillor Goldstein.
I want to declare an interest in this item before we do.
Is that somebody's phone? Somebody's phone came through. That was your phone going into the mic. Okay. All right. Sorry, everyone. That was Mr. Delina's phone going into the portable mic. That is now not happening. Okay. So you wish to declare conflict, and how are you going to manage that?
I just want to mention that depending on where the discussion leads and the resolution, I may have a conflict in this item, being a member of the CAP, in terms of the consideration of the land division application. So I'll leave the room for this item.
Okay.
Perceived conflict.
Thank you. And we'll just note that in the minutes, Kate. Thank you. So we have an officer's recommendation to go into confidence to discuss this item. How do you wish to proceed, Council? Do you wish to go into confidence? You'll need to move a motion if you do. Okay. You've got your hand up, Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, looking at the officer's recommendation and reading the report, it does relate to commercial information from the landowner. I'm happy to move that we go into confidence at this stage. It may well be that the recommendation and everything else is released from confidence, but just for the initial discussion, to put it in confidence as it does relate to the personal affairs of the landowner, and for those reasons.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fraser, are you happy to second? Councillor Fraser seconded the motion. Do you wish to speak at all? No? Okay. Any other discussion on this particular motion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against, it is carried. So, gentlemen, have a good night. You get to go home early. So, David, we're in